Sean Mitchell, Vice President of Customer Success here at Gather AI. See if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure, and I'll do a little bit more detail in a minute, but I'm Steve Mulaik, partner with Argon & Co. We are a partner of Gather AI and a supply chain consulting firm.
Absolutely. And really, we have the pleasure of leveraging the skills and capabilities of Argon. And as Steve mentioned, we've been working together for 5 years now, since early inception. Do just want to give everyone a heads up that we do want to make this an interactive session. And I encourage each of you to go through and actually utilize the chat feature. On the side of the webinar here, you'll see it. There's a chat window right up at the top. It'll pop up and allow you to ask us questions. And we'll do our best to get to all of your questions, and really are excited to tailor this conversation to what you're most interested in. Kind of to kick us off, you are coming in the webinar regarding Overwhelm to Optimize, a realistic guide to transforming inventory control. It's kind of a partnership between Argon & Co. and Gather AI. Steve, I'll hand it over to you, or I guess we'll dive right in.
Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Why don't you start off here?
Perfect. So really, we want to talk a little bit about what is poor inventory accuracy. And when we refer to poor inventory accuracy, we're really looking at the accuracy that's being a huge dredge on the inventory as well as on the operations of the business. And Steve's going to talk about how to move from poor inventory accuracy to acceptable inventory accuracy. From there, what we're going to do is we're going to move and say, how do you go from acceptable inventory accuracy to world-class inventory accuracy? When I say world-class, I mean full traceability. You have an image of every single inventory location. You've got full digital twin. You're really shifting resources now away from inventory control and more into optimizing the business and making sure that you can provide all of that. And this is really where the partnership Argon and Gather comes in, where Argon's getting you off the ground and really solving those hard to reach problems, and the Gather AIs, we'll torture the pun here and take it off from there.
Okay, good. Thanks, Sean. So let me say a little bit about who we are, and I'll start off, and then Sean, I'll let you kind of jump in there. Argon & Co. may not be familiar to you, but we've been around actually for a long time, since 1992, operating in the United States as the Progress Group, and then recently we've rebranded a couple of years ago as Argon & Co. We're a full-service supply chain consulting firm. We do everything. We're going to talk a lot about just warehousing today, obviously, but we also have experts in familiarity with best practices in procurement, supply chain planning, manufacturing, transportation. That includes also not just the practice of business in those areas, but also the technology that can optimize or improve them. We also are worldwide. We've got people in 17 different offices, all the way down in Auckland, New Zealand, all the way up to Atlanta and Chicago, United States. We have 750 what we call real experts or consultants today, and we're growing quite rapidly. Sean, why don't you say a little bit about Gather AI?
Absolutely. So Gather AI is an inventory intelligence company that streamlines warehouse operations by autonomous inventory collection. And really what this means is we're looking to take real world insights and utilize AI to make real value out of them. We've been around since 2018, and the founding team for us is actually the team who provided the world's first full-scale autonomous helicopter. And effectively over the last 6 years now coming up on 7 years, we've captured millions of inventory data points. And what that means then is just completely transforming the way in which our customers look at their inventory. We're funded by Bain Capital, and a lot of our founding team comes from the original founding of Kiva Robotics. If you know us as a company that provides autonomous drones that fly through warehousing, scanning all the inventory and doing a direct comparison. Very excited to go through, show you what AI can do beyond just ChatGPT.
That's great. Thanks, Sean. So, all right, well, let's get into this. I'm going to start off, and I'm going to talk about, how do you go from, I'm going to say, a bad inventory situation to kind of an acceptable inventory accuracy situation. So this means I have to start off by kind of setting the stage. And when I say bad inventory situation, this is usually one that's pretty bad. I mean, it's something kind of like this, where you've got the inventory accuracy problem is so severe that customers are starting to notice. Your service out of the warehouse is starting to be impacted. You may start to see orders piling up next to that are short next to the conveyor, or you've got pickers regularly reporting that they're going out to locations they can't find stuff that they need to pick to fill those orders. That's what I kind of talk about or mean when I say a bad inventory situation. It's pretty severe. And so I'm going to talk about how do you kind of work through all that and get to a point where things are stable and customers aren't impacted. You may not have great inventory. That's going to be what Sean's going to talk about, but at least it's acceptable inventory. It's not impacting your ability to grow or service the business. So to do this, I'm going to have to kind of say a little bit about where do these kind of issues come from. And I want you to know that I've been in the real world. I'm not just a consultant that's talking to you about this. And the things I'm bringing to you come from real working experience, either leading picking teams, replenishment teams, or inventory control. I mean, I've worked in a lot of different places. And I can tell you also, we've been called into situations where there's really bad inventory. And when we kind of dig through the core issues of what do we got to solve, there's a couple of things that obviously come up. I mean, there's supplier mistakes, product was mislabeled or something. There's put away mistakes. People put it in the wrong place and they said they put it in A, but they really put it in C. And now we got to find it. There's replenishment mistakes. They skipped a replenishment, or they put it in the wrong place, or it fell off the conveyor. But really, that when you really have severe inventory problems, it's usually tied into how picking is going on. And so a lot of I only have a limited amount of time. I can't really talk about receiving and put away and replenishment. I'm going to talk about the big portion of this, which is going to be how do you address picking mistakes that in turn cause these customer service failures that get you in so much trouble. So to do that, I got to introduce you to a couple of new terms, probably terms you've never heard of, because I've never heard anybody talk about these. And I want to spend some time kind of setting some definitions in your head so you can really appreciate what I'm talking about when I say these are the things you need to do to improve your inventory accuracy. The first concept I want to introduce is this idea of, I call it the moment of truth. And here's how I'm going to explain this. Imagine that you're in a warehouse and you pick apparel products, like you see this young lady in the picture on the right. You have a location and it has 30 garments. It's a brand new case. You just put it onto the forward pick location. It's got 30 units in it. So the system thinks there's 30. There's 30 actually physically in the location. And then the young lady's told to go pick 10 from that location. So she goes over there, scans the location, scans the product label that may be on the pick face. She picks 10 out of it. And now, the system has 20. Or thinks there's 20 in it, and the pick face has 20. Everything is good. So then she comes back a little later, and she's told to go pick 15. So she goes over there and she picks. She scans the stuff with the RF gun, performs the pick, and the system thinks that there's now 5 left, right? Because she was told to pick 15. But she makes a mistake. She picks 60. Because I'll be honest with you, picking 16 is not necessarily that easy. Everybody thinks that it is, but if you have to do it hundreds of times a day, you're going to screw it up once or twice, because just counting, they get stuck together, whatever. There's a lot of things that can cause that to happen. So she picks 16 instead of 15. So now the pick face has 4. And now we have kind of an imbalance. The system thinks there's 5, but there's really 4. And this sets up what I call a moment of truth. A moment of truth occurs when you're about to pick the last remaining units out of a pick face. So let's say the system thinks there's 5, so it sends her back there to pick 5. When she gets there, there's only 4, so a stockout occurs. And I'm going to talk later about how do we improve inventory accuracy or bad inventory accuracy. I'm going to really talk about how do we reduce the frequency of moments of truth, of getting to the bottom of a box and then discovering that it's short, and then customer service suffering as a consequence. So that's why I'm introducing this topic. And in a minute, I'm going to come back to how do you reduce the frequency of moments of truth. But before I do that, I got to make sure that everybody kind of understands why these things are so important to address. When you have a stockout that follows a moment of truth where there's not as many units as you thought, it costs a lot of money to fix these things. We've studied this multiple times at multiple clients in the past that were suffering from this problem, and it usually takes 5 to 7 times the cost to fix one of these stockouts as it does to actually make a normal pick. So that means if most places are somewhere between, I'm going to say 0.8% and 1.2%, I would say of a stock out rate. That is 1.2% of the time you go to a location, you're told to pick something and you can't make that pick. Well, if that's the normal range, that means if you're running and you got a severe problem and customer service is really suffering and you got like a 6% stock out rate, this is like having 25 to 30% more people in your picking organization than you should. So I tell you this because oftentimes with the inventory control team has to kind of fight to get this addressed because nobody can quite put dollars to it. They can see that the customer is screaming about this problem, but they just drop it on the shoulders of the inventory control. And there's lots of things that have to be done, and some of those cost money to do. And so here's one of the key things you need to keep in mind, that if you're going to improve inventory accuracy, there's money to be saved in doing it. And this is a way of kind of calculating what that might be, because these stockouts that happen after moments of truth are expensive to fix. But let me introduce my second concept. I'm going to call it inventory math. And this, you'll understand what I'm talking about in a second. Most pickers are somewhere between 99.1 and 99.5% accurate. This means, if they make 1,000 picks a day, they're going to make 5 to 9 mistakes in a given day. But a lot of people don't realize that if you have a box of 30 units and an average pick size of, say, 2 units at a time, then there's a 7 to 13% chance that you will have a short pick before that box is empty. And you're like, where does that come? That means also if you're going to do 1,000 replens a day, and they're all kind of in the similar type boxes with a similar kind of activity, you're going to have somewhere between 70 to 130 short picks that you have to address every day. So where am I coming up with this inventory math? How am I figuring this out? Well, let me show you. So if you got 30 units in a box and there's 2 units per pick, that means you're going to make on average 15 picks before that box is empty. If you're 99.1% accurate, that means you have to make 15 perfect picks. What's the chance of doing that? Well, it's 99.1% to the 15th power. 1 minus that, so that's 12.7% chance of that occurring. And that's, if you're 99.5, then it's a 7.2% chance of occurring. I show you all this because I'm trying to give you a feel for what is a key thing we got to do. We got to reduce the frequency of moments of truth, but we also have to try to drive up the accuracy of picking. Because if you could do that, you can reduce the chances of stockouts that result when moments of truth occur. So we're going to talk about both things. We're going to talk about in a minute, how do we reduce the frequency of moments of truth, but we also are going to talk about how do we improve the accuracy of picking, because that's the only way to get from bad to good inventory accuracy. But there's a few more other prerequisites that we got to cover. First of all, you got to have an inventory control team. And that means, well, how many people do you need? Well, it depends. I would say that the typical ratio in places that we go usually has somewhere between, I'm going to say 4 to 6 pickers for every inventory control person. So what is an inventory control person? Because this gets defined differently all over the place. If you have people that are responsible for fixing cycle counting locations that are messed up, or are responsible for making the hot picks that have to occur once you have fixed it, all those people I'd lump into this category. So you need to have somewhere between 4 to 6. What I want to call out is this area on the right-hand side. When I get into a place and I see a ratio of something like 3 to 1, so in other words, 3 pickers to every 1 inventory control person, or gosh, look at this example. For every picker, they had 1 inventory control person. That is a real place. I've actually been there. I show you this because you can also, well, you probably want to be somewhere in here, and if you're really good and you've got really accurate inventory, you might be up here. When I see stuff like this, it suggests that people think that they can count themselves to better inventory. You can't do that. I've seen that over and over again. That's not happening. This is only fixing disasters after they've already occurred. This is not proactive in any form or fashion. So if you're sitting in a situation with 2 to 1, you're likely sinking. You're on a sinking ship. And you need to do some of the things that I'm going to talk about in just a minute to reduce those frequencies of moments of truth and to improve your picking accuracy. There's some more inventory prerequisites, though, you also need to do. First thing, please, you got to have metrics. You got to have metrics. You can't do this just flying by the seat of your pants. what I call out first here is this idea of you got to have a random measure of location accuracy. This does not mean report the accuracy of the counts that you did yesterday, because those are not random. Those usually, if you're doing wall-to-wall counts or something like that, or you're doing cycle counts of short locations, the location accuracy is totally biased. So you can't do that. You also have to distinguish between your forward pick areas and your reserve areas, because reserve areas are touched much less frequently than forward pick. And as I showed you with inventory math, the more you touch something, the more likely it is that it's going to be screwed up. So those should be totally different measures as well. Then beyond that, you want to make sure that the inventory control activity that needs to happen is happening. That cycle counts are being completed per week at the rate you expected. You also need to measure that short pick rate. And then please, you got to have somebody checking the accuracy of pickers. Randomly select. You're not doing every box, but at least something needs to be done to establish what that inventory math is for your site, so you can see if you're successfully driving the accuracy up or it's getting worse. Finally, I sit on the board of WERC, the Warehouse Education Research Council, and I'll tell you, I'm going to put in a plug for that, but I also am telling you that it's worth talking and joining that organization, because there's lots of people that are dealing with this same kind of situation. And having a group of people that you can kind of reach out to kind of informally to say, Bob, Sally, what do you do when you have short pick rates of 6%? Have you ever seen anything like that? What do you suggest I do? I've tried this and that, and it doesn't work. Having WERC in your back pocket is a great source of information and connections to help address this problem. It's also a great source of information, or benchmarking in particular. What you're looking at here is the WERC warehouse benchmarks. There's a bunch of benchmarks. They have I think 80 that they survey across several hundred warehouses every year. The ones I want to call out here at the bottom, these two. There's a benchmark for the inventory count accuracy by location. There's also an inventory benchmark for order picking accuracy that WERC publishes. And what they do is they sort all of their responses into 5 quintiles, right? The top are, for example, with picking accuracy, the top 20% of people that are considered best in class are at 99.8% or above. The average, though, as you can see here, is somewhere between 99 and 99.38%. In terms of picking accuracy. For inventory count location accuracy, this means a location has to be perfect. The average is somewhere between 96 and 99. Now, I'll say with that one, obviously there's going to be a different score for forward pick versus reserve. And so these kind of blend all those together. And I think this particular measure may be weighted more towards places that do more pallet storage than they do, say, piece picking. So it's probably kind of a low number, a high number here compared to most. But this gives you something to kind of use as kind of a goal or a target for improving your accuracy, and say going from down here into something that's closer to a more typical warehouse might happen. So connect to WERC. It's worth your time. So let's talk about how are we going to get from bad to good. And the first one, I think, is how do we reduce the frequency of these moments of truth? And again, a moment of truth is when you're about to go in and make the pick that should probably empty that location. Well, one way you can do is never allow that location to be empty. And you go, what? Huh? I don't understand. Well, you could replenish or top it off every night, or at least for the fast movers or the locations that appear to be, almost out. Let's top them off. Let's not give them a chance to pick the last units out of that location. Let's go back and fill them up. Think about that. You'll never run out. Another thing might be is to maybe this doesn't reduce the frequency, but it reduces the impact of it. But go out and have the pickers. Some systems you can do this. You can configure the system to ask the picker when you're making the pick that's going to set up the moment of truth. That is, you're picking it down. Maybe when she was told to pick 15, ask her to tell you how many units are left in that location. Now, you don't want to do this when there's 20-something units left in it, because they'll screw it up. They'll miscount it. But if there's like 3 or 5 or something like that, have the system ask them. And then if it's wrong, send somebody out there to fix it, or at least to check it. And then in that spirit, there's some places do the third one I have on this list, and that they'll send people out to check all the locations that are vulnerable to moments of truth today. That is, locations that have, say, less than 3 units. Easy to count 3 or less units. And they will go out and they'll verify, is there really less than 3 in here? Oh crap, there's nothing in this location. It's already short, or this one only has 2. It's supposed to have 3. Well, those problems can be addressed before the pickers get there, and those moments of truth result in stockouts. That's another thing we see commonly done. Now, finally, this last one I show, because I've personally seen this, and it's not necessarily very intuitive. There's some places that rely on dynamic locations versus fixed locations. And what I mean by that, imagine that because of the popularity of this item, you've decided to put 3 boxes of it on in 3 different locations. When this happens, you may see a lot of short picks compared to if you just take those 3 boxes and you decide, okay, this thing is regularly popular, so let's just give it a big location. And that way you'll reduce the number of potential moments of truth. You'll cut them by a third. I mean, you'll cut them down by a third, right? Because you're consolidating those into one big location. I've seen also people go the other way. One of the largest retailers I've ever worked with went from kind of having very large fixed locations to this dynamic approach, and their stockouts overwhelmed them so badly that it impacted customer service. And they had to kind of really focus on how do we improve the picking accuracy of the picking team. All right, so that's moments of truth and how we can reduce the frequency that they occur. Let me talk about how do we improve picking accuracy. Well, it depends on what kind of picking you're doing. With case picking, like you see this young man doing in this picture, 30 feet in the air, that he's picking cases from pallets. Well, with case picking, you can implement something called count back. That means when the picker is told to go pick 2 cases, he picks the 2 cases, confirms it, and then the system says how many cases are left on that pallet. Now, if you have, pallets that have 20 cases or 15 cases, that's a reasonable thing to ask them. Now, obviously, if you have 250 cases on a pallet, that's not going to work. But this is one way to kind of make sure that the inventory is still staying in sync. Another one is to have them each individual case be given its own license plate and require that the picker scans each individual case that he or she picks, just to make sure that they're picking all of the ones that they're supposed to. There's still ways to screw that up, but that actually can help improve places that are case picking and having problems. Now let's switch over and talk about piece picking, little things, right? You can do something very similar. You can say, okay, to make sure you're picking the right stuff from the right location, let's have you scan the UPC of the item. You can have them scan each piece. So if I'm told to scan 5, or if I'm told to pick 5, I got to scan 5 individual units. Now, what people oftentimes do to undercut that is they'll grab one unit, scan it 5 times, and then grab 5 more or 4 more or something, and they can still screw it up. But at least it helps verify they're acknowledging the quantity they're supposed to pick. Another thing I was just mentioning at the beginning of this webinar with Sean and I, we were talking. I've actually seen RFID really start to work. So, I mean, you can start to serialize every single unit, and you can either require if it's a printed serial number, you can actually require that the picker scan that for each piece picked, or if it's RFID, you can actually verify they actually did pick what they were supposed to from that location by putting it into a specially designed cart that it would be confirmed within. So those are a couple things for case picking and piece picking. Another thing, like I said, is that the system can be configured for this last one that you see down, or the next to the bottom one. If you're about to short the pick, you'd be surprised how many times a stockout is reported and it's not real, it's fake. It's happened because they're not really at the right location. And all they're asked to do is scan the UPC of the item to confirm a pick. And so in this case, they're actually about to short pick something they shouldn't be short picking. So if they have to scan the location, they realize, oh, hey, I'm at the wrong location, then they'll go to the right place and pick it correctly. Finally, obviously, before you stock out anything, you should look around. I call it the Hollywood Square scan to make sure that the missing product wasn't misplaced someplace somewhere nearby. So those are 2 things: how to reduce the moments of truth and how to increase picking accuracy. I also want to say, as inventory control people, I've done this before, you also have a responsibility. And that is, yeah, go ahead. Sean, were you going to say something?
If you jump back, we got some questions on the previous slide.
Yeah.
So as you're taking pickers out of just basic picking operation and including some of this validation verification, what's the time trade-off that you're looking at?
Yeah, Very, very good question. But you look at a lot of these things, they're fraction. I mean, they're a very small percentage of the overall picking time. I mean, in most environments, 40–50% of your time is just spent traveling. And I'm talking about pickers.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you look at something like implementing scanning barcode cases. Well, for every scan, I teach work measurement at Georgia Tech, labor standards, that kind of stuff. That's a thing I do every spring. I can tell you that from doing lots of time studies, that's a 2.5–3 second max time that you should be allotted to perform that. So if you're looking at trying to scan the UPC instead of the location, that essentially is kind of free because you're trading one scan for another. But if you scan each piece and you're picking on average, like most e-commerce companies will pick, a typical line is 1.2 items. So you're taking 1.2 times 3 seconds. It's somewhere around 4 seconds a pick that you might be spending. So it's not a lot of added time to implement these ideas. Countback would probably take the most of anything up here. But even then, it's not too severe. Maybe you only implement it, you have the system configured to do it when you're like halfway through the pallet. It's not worth doing it at the start, but maybe do it when it's halfway through. Depends on what the system is capable of doing. I don't ever see the cost of these things inhibiting them. It's usually, does the software allow you to do it or not? Honestly,
No, that
but
makes
it's a good
total
question.
sense. And
Yeah.
I think just getting back to your original point that fixing any error takes 5 to 7 times as amount of time. So it is truly a net savings to go through and try to improve your inventory accuracy as you're running.
Yeah, especially with these ideas. I don't think any of these things are too expensive. It's like every time I've ever uncovered one of these things as being kind of a key unlock, it's like everybody's like, hey, let's do it. It's not like, let's go ask the bean counters if we can afford it. It's like, we got to do it. And that's kind of a good segue into this next slide too.
Yep.
I think that, yeah,
I
go
was going
ahead,
to say,
Sean.
before you jump there, we got one more
Yeah.
question.
Oh yeah,
so
sure.
are you picking locations which have stockouts or error counts an issue typically above eye level or below eye level? Or does the placement of, I'm assuming here the question asking, does the placement of the location, higher, lower, affect how frequently it has a stockout? I think this gets back to your previous slide, which had each of the individual cartons, and just seeing is their frequency based upon location of carton.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of, do I really seen that? The only place I've ever really seen some correlation with where on a shelf a stockout occurs more frequently than others would be the upper tier. I mean, if it's a really hard to pick from location, like if you need to get a ladder to go in and pick out of this location, those tend to be more frequently shorted than others. And it happens for two reasons. One, sometimes it's hard to see into the box, even when you get on the ladder, right? And so you'll mistakenly not be able to see some of the remaining units hidden in the back of the box. But the other one is because people just don't want to get on the ladder, they just short it. So I think that's, but in terms beyond, it's not too significant of an issue I've ever seen to where we called it out specifically and said, okay, this is going to solve your problem. Usually there's something else that's much more significant to fix first.
And I think Zach Taylor just coming in to confirm that they're seeing that typically they're having fake shorts if somebody needs to go to that higher location where, hey, it's up and around the corner, it's away.
And I totally believe that. And this is why sometimes implementing that idea in the system where you have to confirm you're at the location before you short it, that kind of right there, that points to, okay, if you are doing that and I see you doing it regularly and I can see you're at the location, you said it's not there, but our cycle count team keeps going back and finding it, okay, we got to have a conversation. I mean, that's just what it comes down to. But it's a good call, Zach, because I think that does.
One last question for the slide. Sorry, Steve, to keep
that's fine.
Going forward.
That's all right.
Caesar had brought up a question. How do you consider when a picker overrides the recommended location for whatever reason? So I think just referencing, when do you allow a picker to override the count? and the selection
Override the
process.
counter
I think I'll take it back.
suggest. I think it means
It's
override and
saying
go to another location. I think it's what he
that
means.
that's what the ask is. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, that's a tricky thing. Depends on how your system works, right? Because if you're going to override and let them go to another location, if it freezes that location, that could be a problem because that inventory may actually be there. And if you need that inventory to fulfill uh, additional orders, because where he's going to be sent will end up exhausting all the remaining portion out of that location, you can end up having a situation where you've now shorted another order. You just kind of passed the problem. I think that again, this is one of these things that's kind of regulated by the systems and what they allow you to do. Most systems like Manhattan Associates, you can configure it to say, I want an alternate location. But let's say that alternate location is like 3 floors up. You want to send some guy 3 floors up to do it? Or would that be kind of something where you don't want to let them override and you're just going to have it short it and then somebody's going to turn that into what I call a hot pick? I mean, I think there's a lot of factors here about how much additional effort it might be to let that person go and perform that pick. If it's nearby, I mean, I've seen some people configure in their system, if an alternate location is within like 2 or 3 aisles, then they'll let them do it. But if it's like on different floors, they won't. Or if it's like the last inventory, they don't have any more in reserve, they won't let them do it. I mean, there's a bunch of logic that gets configured to kind of minimize the potential damage from that. Well, it can also help. It can hurt too.
And it sounds like Ken has chimed in here just to say that they were seeing 60% of their errors were occurring in the higher level locations, so the C and D level, as opposed to the lower level locations. So I think that just having location by location, there is definitely that additional struggle of getting somebody up into a lift, and I wonder if there's something that could fly up there and cycle count it for them.
Well, I've been talking to you about this whole thing of being able to fly through the forward pick area and check how much is left in each one of those boxes, or at least see if there's anything in the box. That I agree. Hopefully that'll rise to the top in just a moment. Anything else? We got it. Can we keep rolling?
Yeah, I think you can keep rolling.
Okay. So there's some things here that, as inventory control professionals, we also need to own. And this chart calls out probably the biggest one. And this, to many people on this call, if you have anything to do with inventory control, you're going to be kind of surprised because, but this is a true story. Years ago, 20 years ago, we were called into a major retailer's e-commerce operation. This retailer, I can absolutely assure you know them. They were shipping somewhere like 750,000 units a day. It was a busy place. And they had recently opened this facility, and it was a disaster. They had short picks all over the place. As you can see by this chart, their short pick rate was somewhere between 5 and 6%. And they had brought in a team of probably 25 people from their accounting firm. They had maybe another 15 people from the warehouse software company. These people had been there for a couple of months trying to solve this problem. There were all kinds of hypotheses about what was going on, and they just couldn't figure out the solution. So we came in and spent a couple of days on the floor looking around at what was going on. And then I grabbed a couple of people from the operations team and said, let's go down and just watch what's happening. Let's follow a picker. Let's then follow the inventory control people and some other stuff. So we followed a picker for about an hour. We saw him short these things. And I then said, well, what's the short pick rate? At that time, they didn't have any metrics to tell us what the short pick rate was. So I asked this guy, I think his name was Rob, and I said, Rob, can you run some queries for us to see how many shorts are occurring every day so we could kind of figure out what this percentage was? Well, Rob goes off and very quickly sits down and bangs out some SQL query and comes back and says, hey, Steve, there's something weird. I said, what do you mean? Well, I pulled up the list of all the SKUs that were shorted today. And what's weird, a lot of those SKUs are the same SKUs that were shorted yesterday. I went, what? That doesn't make any sense. Now, this is the first time this has happened to me. Now, since that, this is again 20 years ago, this has happened to me about 5 to 8 times, I'm going to say. So when we went back onto the floor, we found the inventory control people. We said, hey, what's the story with these locations? They keep shorting over and over again. He goes, what are you talking about? He says, well, you're supposed to fix them once they get shorted. And the guy goes, nobody told me that. So one of the reasons short pick rates can be so high, it's not the pickers. It's because nobody's fixing the location, right? So this problem was costing them $62,000 a day. It's the most I've ever had anything to do with in my whole life. But I tell you the story because not everything that's bad picking is due to bad pickers. It's possibly due to inventory control guys that aren't necessarily following the rules. And this means they also need to be fixing these locations fast and so forth. But let me keep going. So what if you do all this stuff and it still doesn't work? Well, that's when you got to really probably dig in. And this is usually the projects that we get involved in, where you got to collect a bunch of data, floor observations, start doing root cause analysis, and quantitatively, this is use math to figure out which are the issues that are really driving the problem. If it's not picking, what is it? And this could involve things like process changes, or you got to change how you got storage located. You don't have the right storage locations, so stuff is falling onto the floor. The MHE may not be working right, or there could be software problems. All those kind of things in the past, when we get really weird bad inventory, can be tied into one of these 4 things, and then prioritizing those to make sure you're working on the things that matter. I can't tell you how important that is. The next slide, I kind of see, it kind of just summarizes some of the things that we've seen in the past. My favorite is that, the reason that they're having so many problems with stockouts, so they've run out of pick locations and they put stuff on the floor or something like that. But believe it or not, that does happen. It happens more often than you'd like to know. But these are just throw out there for later. We can talk about it. But I want to move on and give Sean a chance to talk about, okay, what if you are good and you want to get great inventory accuracy? So Sean, why don't you kind of take it from there?
Absolutely. Would love to. And again, really what this is saying, how do you leverage AI and automation to put your people in the most value add places of the warehouse? And I think Steve did a great job of expressing, just identifying the pick errors is not enough. You really need to be proactive in how do you resolve those issues. And so the way that our system works is that we come through and we actually create a full digital map of the warehouse. So XYZ coordinates for every single inventory location, we name them, go through, and really what we're trying to do is to create that digital twin, that system of records, so that you can go through and have not just lines in an Excel spreadsheet anymore, but you can actually have an image of every single inventory location with a location stamp, a time stamp, and provide that next level of traceability at a speed that's impossible with a conventional person on a automated lift. And so the way that we do this is, after the whole place is mapped, we launch a fleet of autonomous drones. Could be 1, could be 3. We have a customer that runs 12 at the same time. And effectively what happens is the drones fly from location to location, taking an image of each of those locations. As it's doing so, it's reading text, both printed as well as handwritten. It can't read my handwriting, but if a person can read it, the drone should be able to. We also are able to read barcodes. And when I say barcodes, I mean not just Gather AI provides a barcode. We read our customers' barcodes. We read LPNs, UPCs, lot codes, any information that you have. And then we also are able to count cases on the face, as well as identify how occupied a location is. And then everything is compared directly with the warehouse management system or the ERP. And the beauty here is you now have a visual map of your entire warehouse. And you can actually walk through in the web dashboard, and we provide it to the entire company to say, look at your inventory, and no longer is the warehouse a black hole. It really now is kind of a highly visible and highly traceable environment. And then we encourage to go through and resolve each of the exceptions, each of the errors that are found, and really to empower the team to make sure that they're making timely decisions, so that they don't encounter any of those moments of truth that Steve's talking about. And really that you can shift labor from going through and counting to going through and providing that value add with that higher level of traceability. If we can go to the next slide.
Yeah, and I think, Sean, the point that everybody needs to kind of recognize here is that it's not that the drones automatically update everything. It's that it really multiplies the efficiency of your inventory control team. They're only worried about locations that are at risk. They're not worried about trying to find those locations. The drones find them. That's their job, is to make sure if they are at risk, fix it.
Absolutely. And I think the most common question I get when I meet with inventory control teams, hey, is this going to take my job? I say, look, what this is going to do is work like a magic wand. You're going to look at the next 100 pallets and it's going to identify all the errors. And then you get to spend your entire day fixing problems rather than checking known good inventory.
Yeah. So
And
those
that's
people
the
that
big,
thought, yeah, exactly. You're not going to watch SpongeBob all day. You have to still work, but you're only focused on things that really matter. I think is what.
absolutely. Just a heads up, Steve, I think we lost,
Oh, did we lose
we're
it?
back.
Okay. Sorry about
Yep, there
that.
we go. Perfect. And so that's the big differentiator. It's about taking people and moving them from known good product and kind of checking the results that you know to focusing on errors, focusing on issues and creating that punch list. Here's kind of a quick screenshot of what that web dashboard looks like. And so on the left, you'll see each of the individual missions each time the drone takes off. And on the right-hand side, this is that visual interface. This is where you can go through, scroll through the aisle. And now no matter if you've got one warehouse in your network or you have hundreds, you're able to go through and review the inventory of every location, and it's color coded. So you can see the black flags right there means 0 exceptions, everything matches. Yellow flags tell you this is a verified empty location. It's supposed to be empty, and it is truly empty. There's no stray product. There's no stack of pallets or a stray case that's fallen in. And then a red flag means that's an exception location. Something there didn't match. Either it's pallet 1, 2, 3 was supposed to be there, but 4, 5, 6, or it was supposed to be empty and there's something stacked in that location or something's missing. But the beauty really is in creating that digital twin that allows you to see your inventory as well as to have that historical traceability. If we go to the next slide. Here, just kind of going through and doubling on what is, we're seeing our customers able to review empty detection, meaning we can tell you, is it truly empty? Is it populated? As well as we can also tell you how occupied a location is. So if you're thinking about using this for scanning pick fronts, what you're able to do then is to say, hey, these locations are below 20%. Can you go through and just give me a list of every location that's below that occupancy? And what that means then is you can each night make sure that you're replanning where you're about to run out. You can also go through and do the case estimation. So meaning you can say, hey, the tie high says, based on the tie high stacking pattern, there's supposed to be 10 cases per layer. From here, I count there's 4 cases high. Right there, we have there's 40 cases on this pallet. And anytime there's a variance, anytime there's a difference, our customers, instead of checking the number of cases, are now checking what is the difference between what the system estimated to what is supposed to be there and putting eyeballs on locations that are not correct. And then they're cross-referencing. They're going through and saying, hey, the UPC says it's supposed to be X product. However, the LPN has something different. What's going on here? Did someone place the wrong label? Or if one is torn or broken, you can still go through and validate the same inventory. And then we support anything from, anything from errors that are caused by recalls. So if you're looking for an individual lot code, you can now go through and pull that up and say, hey, what is the inventory that is affected by this recall? Punch that in either by description or by lot code itself, and it'll pull them up and it'll show you picture and the last time they were scanned.
Sean, Zach asked a good question here. I think in some ways you may have just answered it, but I mean, the whole thing about using AI and the drones to compare these images to say, is what's in a location the wrong thing, or also can it detect when you've got like mixed product in a location? I think that the answer is yes, but I'll let you kind of answer that because you're the guys that got the drones and not me.
Yeah, and this is where we clarify we're Gather AI, not Gather drones or drones AI. And really the rationale here is we are going through and using drones as a way to quickly capture the information, but our secret sauce lives in how do we process those images. And to your question, Zach, absolutely, we're able to compare and look at a location that has mixed product in it. Meaning if you have 6 or 7 different SKUs, we can go through, read and identify each of those and make sure that we know, what's there as well as what is expected to be there. So if you're going through and providing something where you have different UPCs or different counts, the only thing that we struggle with is if you're trying to count the inventory for different product, we will struggle on having everything mixed together with several different boxes.
But you'll be able to see if a box, I mean, this is a really important distinction. You'll be able to see if like, I'm thinking case storage, right? If you've got like cases on a shelf, that you're storing for reserve, and those things get mixed up when people do replenishment and so forth. There's so many of my clients. You can see if there's supposed to be 3 boxes that are at this location, and there's 2 of them, and the other one is falling off into this other location. You can pick that up, and you'll detect
Absolutely.
that. You just can't, count how many are in the box, and that kind of leads to this next question. Kyle is talking about, hey, what about forward pick? What can we do to assess the quality of the inventory in the forward pick locations, and as opposed to, say, pallet locations and that are in reserve? Because a lot of the problems that they happen to be having are in forward pick, less so, say, in reserve, because let's get back to the inventory math, right? The less you touch something, the more accurate the inventory is. Where they're touching it most is in the forward pick area. So what can you do for forward pick?
Absolutely. So for forward pick, and this really is, the crux of the problem for a lot of our customers when it comes to the picking and making sure that you're not having missed picks or skip picks. And effectively what we're able to do there is we're going through, taking an image of that location and saying, hey, your system expects there to be 12 cases here. We went through, we counted, there are only 6. Somebody looks at that image, it raises an exception, says, look at this image, and then from there determine, do you need to have a replen? Do you need to have somebody go out and recount this? Or do you need to go through and call a higher escalation of this issue? The same thing to be done with how full is this location. It allows you in those pick slots to also determine, do you need to do a consolidation? Do you need to pull a replen? And so everything, instead of now being lines on a spreadsheet, you're able to go through and rank all of your exceptions based upon severity, meaning, hey, this location is off by 10, this location is off by 50, this location is off by 20, this location is perfect. You can go through now and look at the locations that are most out of order first, and then solve the known good product. And that's the beauty, and that's what a lot of our customers have seen, is they're going through and spending their time and labor on locations that are most at risk. I did see Rich asking, are we implemented 3PLs? Absolutely. We love 3PLs. The 2/3 of our business is in 3PLs, and a little bit I'll share some of the successes that we've seen in the 3PL space.
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of questions about how this kind of generally works. One of the other things that hasn't been talked about that I think you're going to maybe make some announcements in the near future about, but I mean, Ed asked a question about, can you see into, say, pallet pick locations or locations where you might be picking cases to see how deep the location is in terms of inventory? Can you see that there's 3 layers, but the top layer has only been picked, there's 2 cases in the top layer versus a full layer, that kind of thing? Is that possible?
Absolutely. So today we are we're computer vision based. Unfortunately, we don't have X-ray scanners that can see through everything. But from the front face, what we're able to do is to go through and identify each individual case that we can see, and then from there determine the stacking pattern and confirm that with the WMS to say, okay, this is how it's stacked. And we do today round that to the nearest complete layer. And so meaning that there is that variance. If something is pyramid picked or step picked, we do struggle in that. Towards the end of this year, we're looking to move to unstructured case counting. And what that means then would be, if you don't have a tie high, or you have a situation in which you have different stacked or pyramid stacked, we do have the 3D sensing capabilities to identify cases. And so that's something that'll be coming out later this year. So right now we have structured. We're soon to be able to do the unstructured as well.
Yeah, some of you guys weren't on here at the very beginning when Sean and I were just bantering back and forth, but they got a new drone that's coming out that's actually, as opposed to using kind of a consumer drone, they've upped their game, and they've got ones with LiDAR on it, and that's going to allow them to look into the location and see a ton more about what's going on as far as how much is left sitting inside a pick location.
Absolutely.
Some more stuff about, I don't know, maybe we'll give you a chance to get back on track. Some of those questions keep coming. So as long as people are engaged, I guess that's good. So Ken asked about, can the drones and the software automatically research variances by referencing the discrepancy on an item in all of its locations? In other words, this is the holy grail of letting Ken sit at home and watch SpongeBob while the computer figures out where the variance is, as opposed to, in other words, if I'm missing, the drone's great at figuring out I'm missing 2 from this location, but can it find where those 2 are?
Absolutely. So the short
Okay.
answer is yes.
All right.
What you're able to do is you're able to punch in the search bar and say, this is the product SKU, or this is the description. I'm looking for Tropicana juice. And it'll show you every location that's there, as well as you can click on them and see a picture with a timestamp and a location stamp for each one, and multiplies that throughout the whole warehouse, as well as you can see where any of the exceptions, where is it today and where else was it found, right? You can go through and review both of those. Everything is viewable from anywhere that has an internet connection. So meaning you could access that web dashboard. Sorry, Steve, go ahead.
Can you send it back out to say, because some of those snapshots might be from 2 days ago or 3 days ago. Can you send it back out and say, go to all the locations that have blue shirts?
Definitely. So from here, what you
Okay.
do then is you can send an inventory controller out to go through, and they will place the drone in the aisle. And the reason for that, and I think it gets to one of the other questions here, is safety. We do
Okay.
have the drones themselves set up so that they can work on shift with our customers. And what that means then is to support a 24-hour operation, all you're doing is having an inventory controller place the drone in the aisle, drop in a fresh battery, hitting go, and the drone will take off and scan within that aisle. And anytime someone needs to access that aisle space, there's a button on the iPad that controls the whole system that says, do you want a power descend? It comes down, and I timed this in a warehouse 2 weeks ago in Memphis. Our customer was able to, from the minute the picker honked the horn to when they were touching the case, was 10.1 seconds. So again, it's a very quick process, but it allows for somebody to work on shift in an aisle without having to shut down the whole warehouse. In doing so, safety teams love us because we're taking people off of automated lifts, which are at a high risk area, putting them on the ground. And again, we encourage a 15-foot safety bubble, saying, hey, give the drone 15 feet, it'll give you 15 feet as well. And we work from there. And it does have obstacle avoidance, it does have collision sensing, but we don't want to rely on that. That should be the fallback plan, not the primary. And that's where we encourage the safety space, as well as we have somebody in the vicinity who, if you do need to land it, they can just hit the button and it'll power descend. Someone can pick, and then they'll place it back in the aisle and say continue, and it'll keep going. But from there, you can select a mission that's custom that allows you to just look for the Tropicana juice or that individual pallet that was missing last time, or the entire area near where that pallet went missing, or that case went missing, I should say.
Interesting. Come a long way. All right. I think we go on to the next slide.
Absolutely. Yep. Sounds good. So I think there was a question about, do we work with 3PLs? Absolutely. Going through with our customers, many of them see on average a 66% increase in the inventory errors, as well as they're counting 25 times faster with our system. An equipment manufacturer that we work with today has seen an 11x improvement in the inventory taking speed of their inventory. These were individuals who were sitting there, they had 6 pallets high, everything was a placard, and their safety team said, instead of putting you on automated lifts, we're going to give you binoculars. And so they stood there on the bottom, and they referred to inventory taking as a literal pain in the neck, because they were looking up and looking at those pallets themselves. Handed them 2 drones, and now they're able to clear their entire facility within 2 hours. We have a brick and mortar retail customer who was able to find over $5 million of lost inventory. We also have one of our 3PL customers who saw a 90% reduction in the cycle counting inventory that they were using, because they were able to, instead of focus on known good product, they were looking at the variants, they were looking at the exceptions, and really focusing on the locations that were case pick, but were not matching up with their system. And they saw that they're only now focusing on the errors rather than focusing on that known good product. Langham Logistics used to have 10 to 20 pallet fire drills per day in one of their facilities. Now on their worst day, it's 1 to 2, and they're able to quickly resolve them by looking at the dashboard. Some of our customers that you can see at the bottom there, we do work with Army and Air Force Exchange, as well as NFI, Axon, Geodis, DSV, Barrett Distribution, Taylor Logistics.
All big names in 3PL.
Yep. And I encourage, there are more case studies on our website, so please, only given a couple minutes to run through these, but I do encourage you to watch some of the case study videos and testimonials. We can go.
Speaking of case studies, this is the one that totally changed my attitude towards your product and drones in general, because as somebody mentioned, I think Kyle or something earlier, drones historically were great for pallets, But again, getting back to that inventory math thing I was talking about, pallets usually aren't your problem because the frequency that you're picking from a reserve pallet location is pretty low. I mean, you make one put away, one pick to pull the pallet. Um, when I found out about this application, I suddenly realized it's game on for a bunch of industries because the problem he's going to describe with this, a lot of companies have. So I'll without
Absolutely.
stealing your thunder,
And
I'll let you
Steve,
go.
what I want to do is I'm going to describe the problem, and then I would love for you to pitch kind of the conventional solution, what
Yeah.
it looks like, and I'll share what they were doing before. But so this is Barrett Distribution, and they support their customer Stadium Goods. Stadium Goods is a retailer of high-end shoes. So think about anything from $100 to, I think their most expensive shoe is something like $50,000. These are the collector Michael Jordan signed pairs, all of that. They're all in this warehouse. And what they've done to reduce and simplify the inventory taking process is they've polybagged every single pair of shoes. And so each one is indistinguishable from another because they don't want someone to know how to grab the highly expensive inventory. They're going to mix and match it with everything else. So there are 500,000 individual pairs of shoes within this individual warehouse. Previous to using Gather AI, the previous 3PL, so before Barrett, were using 6 cycle counters and saw a 2% shrink. So meaning, if you're losing $50,000 pair, an individual case of $50,000, that's an astonishing amount of shrink that you have if you've got 2. Before we talk about what we did and how we structure this for Barrett, Steve, what's the conventional math here?
Well, I think that the problem with this kind of storage that it's always plagued everyone, and this is super common in a lot of industries like retail, apparel, those kind of places where you're storing, you have a lot of SKUs, so you don't have pallets of inventory, you got cases of inventory, so you use this kind of storage mode. But what happens is people either screw it up when they put it up onto the shelf, that because things they never are perfectly aligned. Stuff falls over. You got to get things that are the one on the bottom. So that means you got to grab the 2 off the top, and you put these over here, and you don't put them back in the exact same location. So it's a real mess. And I don't know anybody today that has a really good solution to this. I mean, there's people that will. At the end of the day, they'll see for their putaways, they'll have to go out and check to see if there's any cases that still are on the dock systemically, but they've been physically put away. And then you got to kind of figure out where do they go, or there's people that are running through trying to really not proactively deal with this. It's almost all reactive. I mean, it's replenishments that weren't executed because the picker just couldn't find it. So you have lots of people that are involved in what we call hot replan activities to find that missing case and get it to the pick module where it's needed immediately. Now, I realize this is kind of more forward pick locations, but the same problem occurs in case reserve for people that store their product like this, and it's even more damaging because it's holding back entire replan quantities. So this is something I think really I didn't think was possible, and honestly, Sean, 4 or 5 years ago, it wasn't possible. Not just you and anybody. And I think this is really where suddenly I got on board on drones, because this is a problem that exists a lot of places, and we now finally have a solution to it.
Absolutely, and I just highlight this is less. This was done actually, Steve, with the same drones that we were using 5 years ago. The difference is the ability of the AI. And this is where we utilize off-the-shelf hardware to bring the power of AI closer to our customers. So what we did is we deployed our drone system, and each bin location has up to 30 shoe cases in them. And so one drone by an operator was able to scan over 9,000 cases per hour. And that's just a single drone system going through. And what they're able to do is now, with one person working part-time on inventory control, they are able to review and fix all of their inventory errors to the point in which now they're at 99.95% inventory accuracy. And they're looking at, the end customer got up and said, hey, look, we took shrink from 2% to 0.01%. Just a completely transformative shift.
That's
and the reason
big
for
money.
that is the visibility. It was money, but it was also the confidence with their customer, right? So their end customers are expecting, hey, if I order a size 9, pair of red shoes, I expect to receive a size 9 pair of red shoes. I don't want a size 13 pair in blue, right? The idea is that it becomes trust. And one of the 3PL customers I was speaking with last week, refer to themselves as, look, we're a bank. You put inventory in, you expect to get the same inventory back out. And so providing this level of traceability has been transformative for the way in which they work with their end customers.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. Totally get it. All right. Well, I think we're kind of at the tail end here. I didn't know if there's a few more questions. If not, but we'll
I
check
think
there in the chat.
we can dive into a couple questions. I think Ed had a question regarding, can you show the last image or the last video of a location where there's an error or for theft prevention? Yes. So effectively what happens is you do have that historical image for every inventory location. And so you could look at the same location throughout time, and based on the frequency that you scan it, you can see all of the inventory movement, but you can also see the history of that pallet as well as, or that case, as well as the history of that inventory location. So if you did have an issue of theft or something of that nature, you know exactly when something occurred and you have that pictorial reference. There's also a question about temperature control. We do today work in ambient. So we actually have a customer of ours, Emirates Airlines, where we fly in Dubai in warehouses of 120 degrees Fahrenheit. We also work in refrigeration and in freezer down to negative
Yeah, I
20
can see that being a big win. I've been in a freezer. That's not a pretty place to pick or cycle count.
It's not, and the beauty here is you're trying to leverage the same human labor to get more done. And so if you
Yeah.
can take your individuals and have them quickly review what's in the freezer, then go to a warmer space, find all the errors and go back and fix them, you're now more efficient and you're improving the employee retention. Right? That was one thing that our customers have pointed out, is that employee retention across the board goes up in facilities that they've added drones because the inventory actually is there. Steve, you talked about it earlier, where people get frustrated when they go to a pick location and it's not there. They get frustrated when someone says, hey, I need you to do this job, and they know, 60% chance it's not going to work. Right? Here, if the mechanism is working well, people want to stay as part of that team.
Yeah, that's true. This does. I mean, it's also that we see the same thing with like AMR robot. Everybody gets worried that they're going to be discouraged because it's taking their job. Actually, every place I've ever been that has this kind of technology, it just makes the place cool. People want to stay because you're investing in them in a way by investing in the technology. I think it's how they kind of read the situation as opposed to a job threat or something.
Absolutely. Another question that came up just in regards to reviewing temperature and having the drones. We do have a system that reads the temperature. Unfortunately, I think the question there is it's very interesting for the facility, but it doesn't meet the auditing requirements of a lot of the pharmaceutical companies, just because they don't review. They review temperature on the full facility and on a calibrated scanner rather than the radiometric that we're doing. So we haven't taken that to market only because we haven't seen that our capabilities match up with the audits.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Oh, definitely. Another one is, issues where the drones do not help. Absolutely. There are lots of individual cases where the drones are not useful. Deep lane storage is something that does not necessarily apply directly to drone-based cycle counting. The reason I say that is if you have lanes of 5 or 10 pallets deep, the drone is a wonderful tool for scanning what's on the face and determining a unique case or unique pallet and confirming it's there. In an industry, if you think about soft drinks or something like that, where it's more about the quantity of cases moving through a location, it's important for the cycle counter to sit there and count how many locations are deep, and that's something that doesn't lend itself well to a computer vision based solution.
But that's also where the LiDAR, the new drone, could make a difference, right? I mean,
it can make a difference.
Yeah.
The difficulty, though, that we have is when you get to that 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th case, you really need to have somebody bob and weave and try to push the case to the side to see what's going on there. And we haven't seen a perfect lock-in. However, for those who are going to ProMat this year, we do have a new product that we're launching, and that will be a solution for bulk cross-docking, as well as put away on forms other than the racking and beyond the drones themselves.
Interesting. Looking forward to that. Definitely going to go. There's another question that came in from Connor. He said, how close does the drone have to be to the pallet? Because is it possible that it could, if things kind of fall off the pallet or something, that could hit the drone, or do you have that problem pop up?
So we've yet to have a situation in which falling objects hit the drone. More frequently, the issue becomes if you have, especially if you have elevated pick and you have shrink wrap hanging down, looks like icicles or curtains. That's typically a bigger threat to the drone itself, and the rationale there is as it's flying by, the drone typically flies about 1 meter to 1.5 meters away from the product, and it'll just get soaked up by the propellers, and it looks like a spider has caught a nice drone for dinner. So we do encourage before you launch system, just kind of look up and make sure there are no the aisle itself is safe for operation. And again, if you do have an issue, we do provide a real-time replacement, meaning if you give us a call, we will overnight a brand new drone. Because for us, the system itself is really just a Magic Flying camera. It is a consumable. So to us, if there's an issue, let us know, and we'll mail out a brand new unit. At the end of the day, you're not paying for the hardware, you're paying for the software and the capability.
Good. Okay, I think we've gone over a little bit of time. We didn't lose anybody, I don't think. So that's good. That sounds like this was an interesting subject. It doesn't surprise me because I think this is one of these subjects where there's a lot of a challenge in the real world, and I hope that you've gotten something from this that helps you address your problem. My biggest concern is the people that really have poor inventory. They don't have time to be on a webinar like this. So if you know anybody that's got this problem, please, hopefully you can, we're going to record this and get it out on YouTube so somebody can look at it later, but maybe you can send them the link so that they might be able to watch some of it. But obviously, for those of you who have good inventory accuracy, they're looking for great or world-class, Sean's email's over there. You can easily reach out to him. If there's any other kind of general questions about inventory control or maintenance processes from a manual perspective, please email me or give me a call. I'll be glad to talk to you. So thank you on behalf of Sean and myself, Gather AI and Argon & Co. for attending this webinar. I really did appreciate everybody being here today. Thanks.
Real pleasure. And Steve, it was so much fun.
It always is.